Hi folks, it's another Wednesday, which means it's time for another BC Poly Hot Stove live from the 7th floor of Metro Tower 3 in Burnaby, British Columbia. I'm Jordan Bateman, Vice President Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, joined as always by...
From across the pond, it's McLean Kay. I'm the editor-in-chief of the Orca, and I am joining you live from the beautiful legislature in downtown Victoria.
McLean, I appreciate you recording this a little bit earlier than normal for me. I'm in the semifinals of the big ICBA inter-office cornhole tournament. So right after this, I got to go over and school a very nice lady from the insurance side of our association and advance to the final, where there'd be a $50 gift card on the line. So.
Wow. Okay. Well, I wouldn't want to keep you from cornholing.
Right. Exactly. The summer is great here at ICBA. Okay. Let's talk about something that you published on the Orca today, McLean. Something that will no doubt advance my not real feud with one Jody Vance. McLean, explain to me why the Orca's Facebook mentions are blowing up and why Jody Vance's Twitter is exploding with the rage of 1 million cyclists.
RIP her mentions, as the kids say, and yes, the Facebook page is just going crazy. I get an email every time there's a Facebook comment, and I don't read them all right away, but it's just like this today. It's crazy. Today, Jody's on a bit of a hot streak. We should say that right off the top. I mean, it was a couple weeks ago, Jody wrote about the sewage and how the E. coli levels are closing Vancouver's beaches. And what happened? She got Vancouver's Park Board to move it to the top of their agenda. That's from results. Last week, she wrote about the Vancouver School Board closing down outdoor basketball courts on school grounds in the summer. Guess what? She got results. Some of them have been reopened. So it's right. And nothing but net, Jody. This week's a bit of a harder target. She went after one of the most well-organized and vocal Twitter subcultures out there, and that is bike Twitter. Jody is advocating for essentially license plates for bikes, registering your bikes, and that it would be done municipally. She uses the analogy of, not unlike getting your dog licensed, and for vaguely similar reasons. It's about accountability to the people who own them. Wow. It's only been published since, I'd say, 7 this morning, so, 3-4 hours, and it's kind of gone crazy.
Yes, for Encore, she will write about drug prohibition and rile up that subculture, and she'll then write about cat licensing, which will then drive those kitty owners crazy. McLean, I have a real problem with what Jody is suggesting here, not surprisingly.
The feud continues.
Well, no, look, and I'm hoping Underscore can kind of straighten her out a little bit on the mechanics, the sheer volume of bureaucracy that would be required to do such a thing. Listen, I was a councillor for 2 terms in the township of Langley. It certainly doesn't have as advanced bike cycling infrastructure as Vancouver does, but also doesn't have knock down, drag them out fights over every single time 10 meters of bike lane goes in somewhere. Here's the thing. How the heck do you license it? It's from just a practical point of view. Are you going to have age limits? Are you really going to license 6-year-olds with the training wheels? Are you going to license the toddler with the Strider bike? There's all those issues. And then what defines a bike? Is a scooter a bike? Is is a hoverboard a bike? Is a tricycle a bike? Is a unicycle a bike? It just goes on, and it just becomes this huge quagmire. I thought the strangest thing she wrote, and look, I've heard the arguments for bike plates and registration, and look, it's nothing but a revenue grab, let's be honest with you. It'd be a way for government to collect some more money from, people who, quote unquote, don't pay their fair share, which I don't think is fair. Criticizing bike owners. I do think, cyclists are taxpayers like everyone else. Some of them own homes, they pay property taxes, some pay their landlord's property taxes through rent. They all pay sales tax, they all pay income tax. So, this idea that they're getting some sort of, part of the pun, free ride, I think is incorrect. But it's just, the sheer magnitude of the bureaucracy that would be involved. There's no such thing as a simple little government program. And then what happens if, so she suggests the city of Vancouver set this up. Well, what happens if I take my kids down to Olympic Village and we take a little bike ride around? Are they going to have to get temporary one-day licenses? Why shouldn't they be licensed if everyone else is being licensed? And this is where you run into all sorts of problems. So once you start to pull the thread a little bit of this sweater, it all kind of unravels and you realize this is a problem that will be much more expensive than you think. And it's a problem that really just doesn't need solving.
All I will say in Jody's defense, because Jody does not need me to speak for her, is
she'll rip me to shreds tomorrow in a much more eloquent way.
She could afford a much better lawyer than I am. But I think Jody would probably say that she's not talking about license; she's talking about registration, which I realize is an esoteric, but it's a slightly different point. She's basically just Well, licensing implies you go through some kind of test. A registration is simply
dog license isn't. Dog licenses don't require a test.
No, and I agree with you that the jurisdictional issue is probably, to my mind, the single biggest stumbling block. And I also, your point about how there's no such thing as a simple government program is very well taken, as you can imagine.
Yes, you think you have 43 communication workers, glug, glug, glug. Imagine the bureaucracy that would be necessary for the city of Vancouver to manage these lights. And let's face it, cyclists also, and look, there isn't a cyclist alive who's going to stand up and say, "Oh, Jordan Bateman's my hero." I'm clearly reviled by the cycling culture, and that's fine. But I stand with the cyclists on this one. We can't even get them to wear helmets, right? Like something that actually helps their safety, you can't even get them to do, even with the threat of tickets. You can't get them to wear helmets. So now we're going to get them to license bikes. You're going to have like bike patrols. You're going to have people like pulling cyclists over in Stanley Park, and license and registration, please. Like it goes on and on. And I think Jody was on such a great run, and now she's gone a step too far. A bike lane too far. Although it'll be hilarious. It'll be hilarious.
This is not something I was aware of. This is not something I was aware of. But our friend Blair King tweeted this morning in response to this that he grew up in Kingston, Ontario, and I guess they did a program like this there, says Blair. I haven't looked into this at all, and it was completely news to me. So I won't go into the details because I don't know them. But apparently they did a bike registration program there, which Blair says actually had a positive effect. So, I mean, Kingston is not Vancouver. And Kingston is a bit of an island in terms of there's no sort of surrounding community. That's not like Vancouver, Burnaby, Surrey. There is no such thing in Kingston. It's just Kingston, to the best of my knowledge. And so, there's a lot of differences. But it's interesting to see that this idea has at least occurred elsewhere.
Yeah, I think when there were big bike theft problems, some communities did serial number recordings, really, right? Like, police officer would come to the school, and back then every kid rode their bike to school, and they'd all go out and write down their serial number, and it was in a database somewhere. I doubt it. It was probably just hidden away somewhere on, like in a filing cabinet at the police station. But I think this is one that it doesn't make a lot of sense. But I am looking forward to seeing George Affleck, the great disagreeer with Jody. I'm looking forward to seeing him passionately defend the rights of cyclists. That will come as a wonderful thing. Now, one more thing on cycling, and Jody has written it's an excellent piece. People should check it out for themselves and make their own decision. Don't just take my word for it. Although if you want to agree with me, whatever, that's fine. By far the biggest travesty of a thing written on bikes though in the last couple of weeks is Kevin Quinlan's 15 tweet string about the greatness of the Gregor Robertson cycling experiment and how wonderful it was and how the media was all wrong. A few points on that, Mr. Quinlan. I look forward to your series on the ending the homelessness problem by 2015 and the wonderful success that was. And I also ask, if it was such a great thing, these bike lanes, why the hell did your guy, Gregor Robertson, apologize for it in the election? He said, we did this stuff wrong. We're not consulting enough. Yeah, you weren't consulting enough. So 10 years on, okay, great. Yeah, so Burrard Street Bridge, great. You did. I noticed you didn't mention any of the traffic people who have to navigate every day by car. I noticed you didn't talk to any of the people who don't live within Vancouver but try to come into Vancouver from time to time and find it just incredibly difficult to get around your city, even to get into your city to spend our money. That's fine. I get that. You have a definite bias. But I would say McLean K here on the line, that Gregor Robertson was the kind of mayor you had to be paid to love. And I'm sorry, Kevin Quinlan, former staff member, I will believe that for a long time.
I don't disagree. The fact that Gregor himself felt the need to apologize for it kind of says it all. You can have a good idea and roll it out badly. I mean, that's the HST in a nutshell, isn't that right?
Oh, don't say that. Oh, no, I'm going to get the hate mail. Okay. My big splash this is... it's very concerning for our point of view as a construction association
Yeah.
because we're seeing the firsthand. So for a while now, we've been talking here at ICBA about how winter is coming to the BC economy. And, we would kind of get like, sort of sideways, side-eyed glances like, what do you mean? Our guys are busier than ever. We're working hard. We got all these projects. Well, the wheels are starting to come off a little bit, or at least starting to get bogged down a bit in the quicksand of the BC economy. And, last week, Carol James brought out her, the year-end financial report, and there was a $1.7 billion surplus, and they had collected $6 billion more in taxes, and spent virtually every penny of it on other services, government services. And, wasn't this wonderful news? Here's the problem. That fiscal year ended on March 31st. We're in a new fiscal year, and it is not going as well as Carol James had hoped. And I'll give you a few pieces of evidence. First of all, Vaughn Palmer today debunks this idea that housing starts are going to hold steady. What we're seeing right now is a spike, there's no doubt about it, in housing starts, but that is people who have got their pre-sales in place and are trying to get their stuff through before the development cost charge increases, specifically in Vancouver, but also around the region, kick in. So they're trying to build it now because they know it's going to be more expensive to build it soon. What we're actually seeing and hearing from developers are towers are being canceled. This wave of projects is going through. The next wave of projects are all in flux or in stasis. The ones that are still a decision to be made are in flux. The ones that a decision have made aren't being built. And that is a big concern. So housing starts are going to fall. And I think even Carol James would say she expects that as well. Retail sales are way down. In 2017, they were up by 9%. They are way down now. Reason why? The NDP has sucked so much equity out of people's homes that you don't have the people reinvesting in renovations for their home. You don't have people investing in that new stove they might need or that new car, perhaps an electric one like Andrew Weaver wants you to refinance your house to do. They don't have that equity anymore to do so. So retail sales are down. Housing starts are beginning to fall. The BC, the forest industry is in complete free fall. It is crumbling. There's nothing coming through new in mining. Oil and gas is at a standstill because Trans Mountain isn't built yet. Coastal GasLink isn't built yet. So you have all these different problems stacking up. And the BC Business Council, which when Carol James sat down to write this year's budget, had said, we expect a growth rate of about 2.4%. That seemed to be the general feeling among the experts. As governments do, they take a slightly lower number. I think she actually proposed it would be 2.3. They've now downgraded their growth estimate for BC this year twice. First from 2.4 to 2.2, and now from 2.2 to 2.0. And people say, well, hey, we're still growing. It's not a recession. Yeah, but we're expecting to grow faster than that. And that generates tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars more for the BC Treasury that you can then spend. So all that to say, we have heard very credible reports out of Victoria from key members of the bureaucracy and even some of the elected officials within the NDP that they've been put on notice that this surplus, don't be thinking that there's a lot of money in the coffers, that the cupboards are bare, to borrow a phrase from Gordon Campbell, and that there's some harsh fiscal restraint coming if they want to have a balanced budget this year. So. Yeah, winter is coming. So those people, and I'm thinking of the so-called Socred who writes for the Tyee, who hasn't done anything for the center-right in 1,000 years in this province, but still somehow claims that he is a center-right organizer. When he says everything's hunky-dory and in the BC economy and the NDP are brilliant fiscal managers, he's still seeing the tail end of what the BC Liberals did. We're about to see what Horgonomics actually creates when you take $6 billion more in taxes and add a bunch of red tape and slow down resource development.
Well, you're right. And less than 2 hours ago, I was on the phone with Ken Peacock of the Business Council of British Columbia about this exact subject. And will be a piece in the Orca later today or possibly first thing tomorrow morning about this very subject and exactly what this means. What does a revised growth forecast down to 2% mean for you and me? And more importantly, what does it mean to the provincial treasury? And if you're Carol James, should you start to worry? And so, yeah, Mr. Peacock had some very interesting things to say about that.
Yeah, and there are people out there who say, oh, wow, the forestry downturn, that doesn't affect the lower mainland, so what are we worried about? Well, by that same token, LNG Canada, which will buoy the GDP numbers in BC for a few years to come once it starts, actual construction begins, if you say the forestry industry doesn't affect Lower Mainland very much, you have to say LNG doesn't affect Lower Mainland very much. I mean, that's going to be great in the north, and in certain communities, there's going to be billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars worth of construction. But you can't have it both ways. You can't say today, well, everything's hunky-dory because, that's more of a regional issue, and then say, but that regional issue will make everything better. Like, you can't have it both ways. So, yeah, I wish we weren't having these conversations. I want to see people working. We want to see construction ticking along. We want to see families able to provide, or folks able to provide for their families. But yeah, if you're out there and you can show any fiscal prudence whatsoever and put some money away, you might want to do that, because we think there's some tough choices coming.
Yeah, and you know what? Before we move on, there's one thing about this story that absolutely drives me crazy. Is I saw a few people on Twitter saying something to the effect, in response to your piece on this, that you and others and myself are somehow rooting for BC to fail.
No.
I hate that argument. I hate that accusation. Nothing can be further from the truth. You work with men and women whose livelihoods depend on construction every single day. I don't think any one of them would ever dream of accusing you of hoping that things go poorly for them. And it also, I mean, think about it. The people who are making this accusation now, does that mean they were rooting for BC to fail 2.5 years ago? I don't think they were, because I don't think they're bad people for the most part. So, I mean, it drives me crazy when people say things like this. Nobody is rooting for this province to fail. Everyone wants it to do well. Mm-hmm. And we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we weren't pointing to, people like Ken Peacock saying, hey, there are some signs coming that you should be aware of.
Yeah, when the analysis is out there, don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
We're looking at these little, canaries in the coal mine going, wait a minute, there's another one, this isn't great.
Yeah.
And, people need to be ready for that. So, yeah, look, those are folks who think the NDP, fart rainbows and can't do anything possibly wrong, and that just is not the case. Horgonomics, yeah. I've been thinking a lot about John Horgan's economic plans here, and Horgonomics boils down to this: billions more in taxes, billions more in government spending. No job is a good job unless it's a government or a union job. Mm-hmm. And just an incredible amount of red tape on employers. Well, you go back through history, if you look at those four kind of pillars, that kind of economy fails over and over and over and over and over again. And that's the problem, and that's what's discouraging for us, because we have, like you said, 250,000 British Columbians working construction. 85% of them work for open shop companies like the ones we represent. We are very gravely concerned that they're going to be the ones who feel the brunt of this coming slowdown. So, yes, no one's rooting for it to fail, but at the same time, you got to have your eyes wide open, man. You got to be ready.
Absolutely.
Tell me about Gerry Butts.
Tell me, what would you like to know about Gerry Butts? Apparently he's back. What does that mean? We don't know. This is a story. I mean, last week we were talking about, it's only fair. Last week we were talking about Warren Kinsella, who is another, I guess in his case, former Liberal strategist, making news by being part of the federal Green Party campaign. This week, it's the federal Liberals' turn to make news with a strategist. It's sort of the return of Gerald Butts, who is Justin Trudeau's best friend and was, I've forgotten his title in the Prime Minister's office, but he was a very senior official. And now I gather he is back in. Yes, that's right. Yeah. I think he was a private secretary. Yeah. But in effect, he was the number. Yeah, he was the Commander Riker to Justin Trudeau's Captain Picard, if you like. He was the number one. He's back in some undefined capacity in the federal election. Does this mean the Liberals have not learned the lessons of SNC-Lavalin? Does this mean that they think that Gerald Butts' insights are too valuable to risk the political hit? I don't know. Does the average swing voter care who's in the Liberals' war room, or the Conservatives' war room, or the Green Party's war room?
Average swing voter? No. The average swing voter does not care who's in whose war room. No. And the only reason why I think it's of interest to the media, because the media loves horse race and this kind of nonsense. It should only really be of interest in that, what does it mean for the tone of the campaign? Yeah. And you have Warren Kinsella, noted street fighter, now working for the Sunshine Party, the Green Party that has been all sunshine and rainbows for so long. So how does that fit? Are they going to go negative? And now you've got Mr. Lead from the Heart Out coming back to help Justin Trudeau come back. Does that mean they're going to be more positive? The answer is no. The Liberals are going deeply negative. They're trying to make the
Yes,
Canada
they are.
food guide, for God's sake, an election issue. It's like they are going to go as negative as they possibly can and tie Andrew Scheer to Donald Trump and tie Andrew Scheer to Boris Johnson and tie Andrew Scheer to Doug Ford, and probably the late Rob Ford and any other, and Stephen Harper and any other conservative politician who's ever lived who may have had a negative, who maybe has a negative worldview at the moment. They will try to tie him to those people. And like the Liberals, there is no sunny ways now. Like sunny ways is over. My suspicion on Gerald Butts is the people around Trudeau, more than Trudeau himself, may have begged him to come back, because I don't think Trudeau listens to anyone like he listened to Gerald Butts. And
I think that's true. I mean, they have been lifelong friends, apparently. So, I mean, this shouldn't really come as any surprise. Even if they swore that Gerald Butts was being locked in a closet from now until November, he and the Prime Minister, who is the leader of the Federal Party, obviously, are still going to talk every day. He was going to be part of the campaign in some capacity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, yeah, I don't think, I'm not sure it matters. The funny thing is, like can you imagine the outrage if who is Stephen Harper's chief of staff who stepped out? Nigel Wright came back and it was going to help the Conservative campaign. Like the media would just set their hair on fire. Oh my God!
It would.
But Gerry Butts and whatever happened to SNC-Lavalin. Now my ripple though kind of ties into this. This was breaking news just before we went to air. UBC Press announced today that the Jody Wilson-Raybould tell-all, and I'm going to read the title, "From Where I Stand," will be released on September 20th, about 1 month before the federal election. McLean, could she actually possibly get into it more, like get into the nitty-gritty of SNC-Lavalin and the pressure from the Prime Minister's office and Gerry Butts and Trudeau and the Privy Council dude and Ben Chin, our good friend? Like, could she actually get into the muck and mire there and expose more, or is this going to be a nothing burger during the campaign?
It's so hard to say. I mean, she is obviously one of those people who keeps everything and records phone calls. So it's entirely possible there are more embarrassing phone conversations to be revealed. And boy, she couldn't have picked a better time to do it. But that said, you start to wonder if people have kind of moved on from SNC-Lavalin. It's not it's not that long ago people wouldn't say the name SNC-Lavalin without shaking their fist or spitting on the ground. And now it's just kind of, I vaguely remember that. Yeah. And so we'll see. If she decides to go really salacious, this will make waves. If it's just kind of hope and stirring in her vision for Canada, I think, it'll be warmly received, but that's about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think she has to put in some gossip and juice into it, though, if she wants people to actually read it. Now, the book description talks a lot about her views on reconciliation and those types of issues. Great. But I think if she legitimately wants people to read it, she's got to put in the gossip, right? Like, you're going to need the hook. Otherwise, no one's going to do much on it. Anyways, am I pre-ordering that? Yeah, we are.
Hell yeah. Me too.
That'd be great. The last book I did a review for got lots of buzz on the Orca, so I'm sure this one will.
That's true.
This one will as well. All right, McLean, it's time for our hot and cold politicians. My hot politician is Prime Minister Boris Johnson, following in the steps of David Lloyd George, Tony Blair, Winston Churchill. We now have BoJo, Boris Johnson. The problem for Boris Johnson, though, is his hair is crazy, so immediately everyone assumes that he's just going to be like Trump.
That's true. Well, pit the elder, pit the younger, and BoJo. It's one can only imagine how Her Majesty felt in that conversation, because she has spoken to every prime minister since Winston Churchill through everyone from Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair to today, and that's Boris Johnson, who if you Google image search him, one of the first things you'll find is him ziplining through London wearing a ridiculous helmet and carrying UK flags. It's not very statesmanlike, is it? But that's where the UK finds itself right now. The choice between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, and man.
Now, Johnson's an interesting cat because he's a hard Brexiter, which is why he's there now. They're leaving. He supported the Leave movement. They're leaving. So, that's an interesting kind of thing. But, he is generally considered sort of a reasonable conservative. Like, he's not, super ideological on it. And even though he wants to leave the European Union, he's been generally favorable towards immigration, which
Yes.
lots of people want to just make him like a crazy, he's going to throw kids in cages like our southern neighbors have been doing for years apparently. He's not like that at all. So he will kind of confound expectations, I think, on this side of the pond. Maybe over in Britain where he's a bit better known. Former mayor as well of London, so may have a more acute interest in urban issues than the average Conservative politician here in Canada. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm curious. I'd like him to get past the Brexit stuff and see what he kind of does on the urban side. Like, I think there is a real vacuum or lack of people of Conservatives who talk about urban issues and how conservatism and the urban areas interact. A lot of times they just sort of write them off as lefty socialist voters and don't actually talk about these issues. But clearly, for the BC Liberals, for example, seeing what an urban conservative agenda looks like would be helpful.
Yeah, no, and these are all very good points, and I agree with all of them. But I mean, ultimately, he's going to be judged on one issue and one issue alone, and that's how he handles Brexit.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
If he survives Brexit, however it goes, then he'll get noticed for what he does and doesn't do on urban and other issues. But for now, that is a one-issue country and a one-issue prime minister.
It is something how the Brits chew through prime ministers so much quicker, hey? Like,
it is. And
I don't know if it's because caucuses are so large that there's safety in numbers and they feel like they can do it, or there's so many disgruntled backbenchers because you have, instead of, what does Justin Trudeau have on the backbench? 120, 140. Instead you have 350. Like that. They just chew through leaders so much quicker in their system than we do here, even though it's the same setup. So.
That was the plot of the original UK version of the House of Cards, is how a backbench Tory MP eventually plotted his way to becoming prime minister, which is, kind of unthinkable, even though we have much the same system here in Canada.
Yes. Well, I couldn't possibly comment. Okay, go ahead, sir.
I was going to talk about Canada's hottest politician is not really a politician per se. It's Canada's two legacy parties. I mean, it's not too long ago we were talking about a green wave, and we were talking about the NDP under Jack Layton, and to a lesser extent, but still I think in the same sort of league, Thomas Mulcair becoming a viable third option in Canada, and certainly a political movement with a lot of heft. That's just simply not the case anymore. And I haven't even touched on Maxime Bernier's sort of splinter movement. This election has come down to two parties, and it's Canada's two sort of legacy parties, if you like, founding parties, if you like, the Liberals and the Conservatives. It's kind of interesting to watch Canada revert back to the mean, where the NDP have become kind of a very regionally concentrated protest vote, and the Greens that even more so. And so, it's all this hand-wringing about how does Canada and the first past the post and the Westminster system work in the multi-party world. Well, Canada's political system is getting a little less multi-party all the time.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. By the way, I had a little chuckle at the BC Greens sending out an email to their supporters, patting themselves on the back because they launched a fundraising campaign about a week ago, to get out there and do meetings and talk about the climate emergency, and they had raised a grand total of $1,500. Well on their way, though, to their goal of $4,000. Like, this is the smallest of small potatoes, and you wonder, like, if that's all Andrew Weaver can pull, like $1,500, like in this, like, is that all they can pull? How are they ever going to be a force, a long-term force in BC politics? But I guess you don't need to raise that much money when you've, basically gotten there on nothing and now have sweet, sweet taxpayer subsidies to pay for all of your campaigning.
It's not a great look. Yeah, I saw that email as well. $1,500 is it works to $200 a day, give or take?
Just $200 a day. You can sponsor a green politician. All right, McLean, you're a cold politician. I can't believe you're doing this. The great mayor of the city of Surrey, soon to be BC's number one city, and where the future lives, according to the motto. How could you put him on the cold list? Well,
I mean, come on. When your majority keeps being frittered away by the day, and the political wisdom of the time, as his big issue, of course,
he's smarter than those guys. He knows it all. Come on.
We shall see. I mean, I was talking about this with Mike Smith on the radio last week. There's obviously no great enthusiasm in the NDP government here to accede to Mayor McCallum's SkyTrain to Surrey. That would be very expensive.
Sydney by the sea, getting SkyTrain next.
Man, You heard it here first.
Can you imagine how packed those trains would be?
Can you imagine how expensive that would be, and how bad that would be if there was an earthquake?
We
should talk about a bridge sale in one of these days.
We're going to spend $42 billion on a bullet train to Portland. Why shouldn't we spend that on a sky train to Sydney?
I've read, you know what, we'll have a special edition about this. I have read these studies. I have read the proposals, and it is so wildly improbable and impossible that it's almost hysterical. But my point is, for poor Doug McCallum, the popular wisdom here in Victoria is that Mike Farnworth, whose ministry this is the responsibility of, he's probably best to just kind of sit this out and wait and see what happens in Surrey, because if he does in fact lose his majority, McCallum, and I think it's down to one, you'll correct me,
yeah.
Then this problem will kind of go away for the NDP government, and that's something they would very much like to happen. And so for whatever reason, Mayor McCallum, unfortunately, it's not like we can call him hot right now, so that is why he has landed in the cold pile. He may well recover.
Picture this, McLean, Doug McCallum's world. I'm in Langley. I get on my SkyTrain. I take SkyTrain to Surrey. I float down the canal that he's going to build north to south to it's the big station where I can get on a bullet train and be in Portland in 2 hours. That's vision, sir. That's why Doug McCallum is. No, I'm just kidding. Escorted by Surrey police officers the whole way.
That's right. Yes.
No, he's ice cold.
Surrey's finest.
He's ice cold. You're right about the majority. He's clinging to that one-seat majority. Well, I don't think Doug cares. Like my sense is he's a one-term mayor and he's 75 years old. There's two things he wants to fix, and he's just going about doing it, but not in a terribly modern, collaborative way. So. Yeah, I'm not sure. I wouldn't count on Surrey being able, or on the province being able to wriggle out of the decision on a Surrey Police Department. I do think that at some point they'll be forced to make a decision one way or the other. But we'll see.
And before we let you go off cornholing. Who's your cold politician?
All right. My cold politician, Calgary taxpayers. Now, I know Calgary near and dear to your heart, sir, but and really,
it is indeed.
I blame Abbotsford, and here's why. So Calgary taxpayers are on the hook, I think, for $250 million out of a $500 million arena project to make sure the Flames aren't playing in that rickety, dilapidated Saddle Dome, to make sure that Johnny Hockey stays and doesn't leave to come to greener pastures, all those important things. But it was really Abbotsford who got the Calgary Flames ownership group hooked on corporate welfare. And I wrote about this about 4 years ago. When I was with the Taxpayers Federation. But way back when, Abbotsford had a brand new arena. There's a hilarious story. They built the arena because Chilliwack built an arena. And forget the business plan. They asked how many seats the Chilliwack arena had. They found out and they said, great, we're going to have 500 more than Chilliwack. True story. So no business plan really there. So they had this empty 7,000 seat arena. And they said, we're going to bring in an American Hockey League team to play there. Who cares if there's no American Hockey League team within several hundred miles, like they were all on the East Coast. We're going to have this American Hockey League team, the Abbotsford Heat. The Calgary Flames said, great, yeah, we'll move it there, but you have to pay for the travel and a bunch of other subsidies because it's so much more expensive. So let me just run through what the city of Abbotsford taxpayers paid for. First of all, they paid the $70 million for the building to build in the first place. Then they spent $2 million on a new scoreboard. They spent $350,000 for a dressing room redesign. Untold hundreds of thousands of dollars on a hot tub installation. They then also covered every cent of the Heat's losses of $7.2 million over 5 years. By the way, that's a $21.48 subsidy for every single ticket sold to a Heat game. $21 subsidy. So you take your kid, you're being subsidized by taxpayers $42, $43. At the end of it, they decided this is too expensive, this is crazy. So instead of, but they were tied into a 10-year deal, they stroked a check for $5.5 million to the Flames just to get out of the final 5 years of the deal, because otherwise they would have lost $10 million. So all in all, the Flames sucked $15 million in corporate welfare out of Abbotsford, a city of 120,000 people. That got the Flames hooked on the corporate welfare. Ken King at the time was the president. Is he still the president? I don't know.
I believe so. Yeah.
Ken King at the time, they probably said to himself, hey, wait a minute, there's other people who can pay for hockey, not us. This is fantastic. And here we are 4 years later talking about an arena project. And I'm surprised Nenshi went along with it, but then I've never really understood Nenshi's politics, to be honest.
Well, yeah, I actually, this one it does hit close to home to me, to be honest, on this one. And it's for unrelated reasons. Calgary is going through a property tax issue of its own, and we can talk long and hard about that. But the end result is that council was forced to find $60 million in savings out of their budget because they couldn't jack taxes up any higher. And so literally within 24 hours of announcing they were going to spend $250 million or invest $250 million, if you like, in this arena, they were announcing they were cutting funding to the firefighting services, Calgary Police Service, and a few other, not hefty amounts. We're talking $6 million each, but I mean, I'm a Flames fan and was born and raised in Calgary. I would much rather have a fully funded police service than a brand new arena. I don't know about you. The timing is just staggering, especially for a mayor and council that had been so, I was going to use the word obstinate, which is negative, but they were very firm in the face of a lot of pressure before it to move on a previous deal and didn't. And so for them to move so quickly on this is just surprising.
Yeah, and let's face it, this is a electorate that just rejected the opportunity to bid on the Olympic Games. Despite the fact that they had hosted 1988, many of the voters remembered fondly 1988. They said, no, we don't want to do it again because they didn't want to spend all this tax money on these kind of sporting facilities. So instead of listening to them, they've come out and said, no, we're going to do it anyways, or we're going to do something like it. So, it's I don't understand it. It'll be interesting to see if it happens. If then she can stand.
I think it will happen. That seems to be my sense that they've convinced themselves this is necessary. The Flames and their supporters. The one argument they would make is that they're giving I think it's a 2% ticket tax, which will go entirely to the city. And so over the course of the 35-year lifespan of the arena, they'll more than get their money back. But I mean, that's their argument, and we'll see if that actually happens.
They won't get their money back. In fact, it only totals up to $150 million, that ticket tax.
Oh, there you go. See, I haven't had a chance to look at it completely. Yeah. So
Trevor Tombe is the guy to follow on Twitter. He's just shredded this thing, and I guess one of the calculations too didn't take into account net present value and things like that. So essentially, the old argument, would you rather have $900,000 today or $1 million 20 years from now? Well, of course, you're going to take $900,000 today because you can make it work for you. Further, they didn't do that kind of calculation, so there's a lot of problems there in the way this business plan's been presented. But we'll see. Look, it's Alberta, it's Calgary, whatever. I hate the Flames. You want to know why?
I love the Flames, and I always will.
Kicked it in. That's why. Otto kicked it in.
Fair. Counted.
All right, and that is it. At the Orca BC on Twitter, facebook.com/theorcabc, theorca.ca. He's at McLean K on Twitter. I'm at Jordan Bateman. We won't be here next week because I'm away. So we'll be back probably, I don't know, how's Thursday the 8th look for you, McLean? Gives me
actually, no. Maybe the week after.
You're gone as well. Okay, well, there we go.
I am.
This might be it. What are you people going to do for 2 weeks? You're going to have to listen to Unspun and hear all the craziness over there. I feel bad for our viewers.
Well, it's going to take Jody a couple weeks to unpack and deconstruct you, I think. So, this next episode is going to be solely the Jordan Bateman bashing episode.
I was gentle with her compared to what she's getting on Twitter and Facebook.
That is
true. My God, send your tweets at Jody Vance. Tell her why I'm right and why there shouldn't be bike licensing. All right, thanks for watching. We'll be back, August 14th. Just stay tuned. You'll see us soon enough. We'll be around. Thanks for watching The Hot Stove.